Hello and welcome to today's briefing on USDA Hurricane Recovery Resources Update for agriculture stakeholders. My name is Tammy Wright and I will be your moderator this morning. Let me first thank you for joining us today. Today's session is the third in a series of presentations by the Farm Service Agency, Natural Resources Conservation Service, and Risk Management Agency to outline existing assistance programs and recent flexibilities for those affected by the hurricane. Previous recordings can be reviewed on farmers.gov/hurricane. Now, join me in welcoming Farm Service Agency's Acting Deputy Administrator for Farm Programs, John Berge.
Thank you very much. I hope everybody can hear me just fine. Just to sort of open us up, I want to thank all of the farmers, ranchers, stakeholders, USDA staff from across the country that are joining this call today. We're here to, again, talk about our assistance to help you recover from the recent hurricanes in the region and the associated related weather events. We're going to provide updates on our waivers and flexibilities for those impacted by these storms before diving into the difference to address loss when the tree is the final product or the loss when what is grown on the tree is the final product through both crop insurance and the tree assistance program. We'll discuss the removal of tree debris and clearing land for operations through the Emergency Conservation Program, commonly known as ECP, or the Emergency Forest Restoration Program and Environmental Quality Incentive Programs. We encourage you to document your damage and losses as best you can, but we also recognize that some of those records may be damaged or lost or destroyed and might be unattainable. In that instance, we want you to be sure that you contact your local USDA service center, and we'll work with you to help you access all the assistance that you need. First of all, I think everybody's aware of this, but I wanted to cover this in any event to talk about our disaster designation process. We have moved very quickly in implementing the presidential disaster declarations. When FEMA approves aid for a county, FSA will immediately start disaster relief programs and have done that. We've also facilitated the administrator's physical loss notifications for counties without a presidential disaster declaration, but with physical damage. FSA has worked with those counties to get those approved for emergency loans and disaster set aside. Collaboration with states, we've been working with state governments as well as our state operations in each of the affected states to gather information about crop losses and recommend counties for additional disaster relief. In streamlining these processes, FSA has aimed to provide faster assistance to farmers and ranchers affected by this disaster. Next slide, please. Wanted to touch on ELAP. This is the Emergency Assistant for Livestock, Honeybees, and Farm-Raised Fish. ELAP is assisting with grazing losses due to hurricanes and flooding on eligible acres for up to 150 days of grazing for all non-federally managed land. We provide assistance for purchased and produced feed losses due to hurricanes, and feed purchased above normal due to hurricanes is also eligible for ELAP assistance. Next slide, please. We've authorized the eligibility of ELAP transportation assistance to hurricane impacted states to assist with above normal costs to transport livestock to feed and/or transportation of feed and forage to livestock. It's important to note that we're paying $6.60 per loaded mile for that purpose. We've also authorized the ELAP water hauling assistance in hurricane impacted states to assist with above normal costs associated with water hauling, and that reimbursement rate is 10 cents per gallon. Late filed applications are always accepted and considered by the county committee, but to ease the reporting burden, we've also extended the reporting period to January 30th of 2025 to submit an ELAP notice of loss and application for payment for 2024 losses. Next slide, please. Next, we'll cover the assistance for damaged and lost trees on products grown on trees. Next slide. Tree Assistance Program, probably are very familiar with this, but the purpose of the program is to provide financial assistance to eligible orchardists and nursery tree growers to replant or rehabilitate eligible trees, bushes, and vines lost by hurricanes and other associated natural disasters when the tree, bush, or vine is the means of production and not the product. TAP assistance extends to trees, bushes, and vines that have not died but are no longer capable of production or economically not economically viable. Producers also have until January 30th of 2025 to submit a notice of loss, and state committees may waive that requirement for on-site inspections. Next slide. I'm going to turn it over to my friends at RMA to cover this slide.
Thanks, John. Crop insurance covers both losses due to the fruit and nut of the tree, as well as the trees themselves in some varieties. The most important part about reporting a crop insurance loss is making sure that the policyholder is reaching out to their crop insurance agent, making them aware of the potential loss, and keeping them updated throughout that process. We have issued emergency procedures, and these apply to both the fruit on the trees as well as the trees themselves if the producer does have that coverage. The goal of these emergency procedures is to allow payments to be expedited and to try and provide ways to quickly process those claims. The first one is on providing that notice of loss. You know, when you've got tree coverage, many times the damage is not evident until a later time. So as soon as you're aware that you have suffered the event, whether you're seeing that damage or not, it's important to communicate that to your crop insurance agent. We are taking steps to simplify the claims adjustment process for many crops and trying to reduce the burden of those on-site field determinations. In many cases, appraisals have been waived where they can be, and we've also taken steps to specifically address crops that may have been adulterated due to being in floodwaters. Next slide. So specifically for crop insurance and trees, again, we've got the coverage for the actual fruit and nuts, and that's a separate policy. But if a policyholder has actual tree coverage, these are the types of pieces that come into play. We offer a tree-based dollar amount of insurance, and essentially what that does is it insures the replacement costs associated with that tree. We also offer, and this is additional on top of their tree policy, but something called the Comprehensive Tree Value Endorsement. And what that is covering is future revenue caused by the damage or losses. Now, this is not available on all tree types, but it is for many, and I'll go over that in just a minute. I did also want to mention that on the actual fruit losses, if you are noticing quality type issues, maybe you're going to have to adjust from a fresh to a processed practice, or you have to switch from fresh to juice in the case of citrus. That's, again, very important that you're reporting that to your crop insurance agent and making them aware of what your intentions are as far as changing your use. So just keep that in mind as you are just making those determinations. Next slide. And then this is a list of all of the different types of tree insurance policies that the Risk Management Agency carries. Most of the trees on the left-hand column, all of the citrus and other Florida fruit, were potentially impacted by recent hurricanes. And on the right-hand side, we have pecan trees that were also in the region that were impacted. And we, again, have addressed those through our emergency procedures and allowed some additional flexibility for insurance companies as they start to assess those damages. Next slide. And I will turn it back to John.
Thank you, Heather, very much. Now we're going to cover the Emergency Conservation Program, the Emergency Forest Restoration Program, as well as EQIP. I'll turn it over to my friends at NRCS in just a moment. Next slide, please. Emergency Conservation Program provides funding and technical assistance for farmers and ranchers to restore farmland damaged by natural disaster. Right after the storms, we authorized an extended ECP sign-up that begins on October 15th, 2024 and runs through June 1st, 2025 in states affected by Hurricane Helene. Producers impacted by Hurricanes Debby and Milton should contact their local county office for ECP sign-up dates and details. Next slide. To support critical disaster recovery efforts to farmland and privately owned forest land, FSA provided the following flexibilities to streamline producer assistance with ECP and EFRP. We waived the on-site inspection to expedite determination of need and approvals of restoration work for all ECP practices with the exception of engineering practices. Engineering practices disturb the soil below the plow level, including pond embankments, dams, buried pipeline. For EFRP types, forest types, to remove hazard trees up to 100 acres aggregate. Restoration plans are required for all other activities for site prep and planting, etc. Next slide. In addition to waiving on-site inspections for damage related to Hurricane Helene, DAFP is also authorizing an additional flexibility to assist with participant assistance. We've authorized foregoing the requirement of producer requests for work start prior to submitting an application for certain emergency non-ground disturbing activities, such as surface debris removal, fence repair, and hazard tree removal up to 100 acres in aggregate. Next slide. Following ground disturbing activities will result in additional environmental screenings and are not allowed to start work prior to the application. This would include stumping, removing tree roots and removing non-hazard trees, burning debris or disposal of debris inappropriately, sediment removal, and any impacts to water body, wetlands, floodplains, riparian buffers, threatened or endangered species, their critical habitat, or cultural resources that would otherwise require consultation. Participants are encouraged to submit dated photos, GPS points, imagery, and maps of the affected areas. Both reference policies apply to all USDA employees requesting ECP and EFRP assistance, and will also apply to late filed applications filed within 30 days of the end of the sign-up period and associated with the reference disaster event. Next slide, please. I'll turn it over to my friends at NRCS.
Thank you. But I did want to touch on really quickly debris removal, cleanup, kind of a land rehab practices. With respect to debris removal, NRCS provides assistance under two practice standards. But that the assistance that's provided, again, we're addressing those resource concerns caused by the natural disasters. Do want to reiterate, even from our last meeting, applications must be on hand before practices start. John just touched on some of the things that still would be applicable as far as the additional consultation when we're looking to remove stumps, clearing land, or anything of that nature. With those applications, states are issuing early start waivers, so we are not hindering a producer or landowner from moving forward, but taking the opportunity to still allow work to commence while producers are still making sure eligibility is being met prior to any contract development. But under those two practice standards, one is obstruction removal, Conservation Practice Standard 500. The other practice standard is clearing and snagging, that's Conservation Practice Standard 326. Under obstruction removal, this particular practice applies to sites where an obstruction needs to be removed to address a resource concern or support support another conservation practice. So across the landscape, I know we've got a lot of displacement, whether it's sand or sediment, whether it's trees, tree roots. It could be a number of things that becomes an obstruction to the landscape, maybe on a farm field, and having those items now removed. But again, making sure you're touching base with your conservation planners, your local service centers that can provide you with any assistance and direction with either of these particular practice. Now, the clearing and snagging conservation practice standard applies primarily to our watercourses, our streams or our channels, whether they're natural or improved streams or channels, and that's removing any vegetation or other obstruction from those channels. So landowners that are, depending on location, that may have debris that's backing up any of the streams or channels running through their property. These are the conservation practices that can be implemented along those areas. These practices are also available with EWP as well. I know a lot of that work will be outside of our typical farm operations, but there are several practices that will apply to EWP as well. So just making sure that you work with the conservationist in your local office, developing that conservation plan, basically, and really making sure you have an application on hand. We've exercised flexibilities of taking an application. So with all the work going on, and I know people are busy in a lot of different areas right now, phone calls, text messages to your local service center. If that local service center is down, you can always reach out to the state office and have that conversation with them. But if nothing else, making sure you document on your application the disaster that you're a part of. Some of these things, as I mentioned before, may not be immediate, may not be within the next 90 days. It could be the next 12 to 18 months before we're able to really begin working some of these areas. But in order to take full advantage of what's being offered through a disaster assistance, as well as the presidential declarations, we need to make sure our applicants have that application on hand. I'll stop there and turn it back to you.
So just to reemphasize, some important resources are available on this slide. Just pointing out the farmers.gov/hurricane has a lot of good resources, including the items that are listed below. Also, if your local county office is closed, you can always call the FSA hotline as well. I do want to, if I could, Lauren, just go back for a moment, not to a slide, but just to reference a couple of additional important items related to the tree assistance program. First of all, the tree assistance program, the deadlines are from the disaster or when the loss becomes evident. We recognize that you may not know that you have a loss with your trees until the trees start to leaf out in the spring. So we do recognize that and can work to accommodate that. The second thing is that our NAP price list may not necessarily represent your same price list, and so we're working on that issue as well, and do want to reference too that NAP can cover losses associated to quality rather than just the crop loss. So just wanted to touch on those couple of items as well. Lauren, I think we're at the end of the slideshow. I think we can turn it over to a Q&A now, unless there's anything else that anyone else wants to add.
Thank you all. We're going to move into Q&A at this point. The first question that we have from the chat is the value of unharvested fruit due to extreme cracking from excessive rain covered? I'm going to start there with Heather at RMA, if you could speak to that. And then, John, I'm going to come over to follow up on what you just said on some of the NAP coverage. But go ahead, Heather.
Yes, I think that would probably be something we would have to have the loss adjuster weigh in on. But yes, to the extent that there is damage to the fruit and it cannot meet its intended use, then that would be taken into consideration. It depends on how you insured it, though, and what your intended use was for the fruit. But really up to the loss adjuster when they come out to evaluate.
Thanks very much, Heather. And John, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Scott. I'm not sure what I'm responding.
I'm sorry. John, I think what I was seeing was that the coverage of quality loss depends on if the person in NAP, depends on if someone took the quality loss, actually signed up for that at the beginning. So that it can be covered under NAP, but only if it was signed up for at the start of the season. Did I get that right?
That's accurate, Scott. That's a good point to flag. There is a buy-up coverage that would have been available at the beginning of the season.
And I think what we're acknowledging here as we're requesting any, if you have any other questions, please feel free to put them in under the the Q&A. I think what we're acknowledging here is that at this point, when we're talking about the coverage of the products that come off of trees, fruit generally, we're really talking about programs, NAP and crop insurance, that you would have signed up for in advance and would be determined by price selections or other parts of those programs that you would have signed up for in advance. So it really depends on what your coverage level was, depends on what your coverage looked like. When we get into the loss of the trees, so for instance, an orchard where trees are lost, that gets into the TAP damage that then you're talking about TAP for the replacement of trees where the tree is what's producing the crop, not the crop itself. I'm going to open it up and see if there are other questions to come into the chat or any requests for more information. I'll turn back to my panelists for a second and just ask if there's anything else that you wanted to clarify, anything else in this that, there may not be, but if there's anything else that you wanted to clarify before we finish up. And we really encourage folks to if you have questions or comments, go ahead and put them in the Q&A chat. What about fruit that wasn't harvested due to unsafe work conditions due to heavy rains? That said, fruit being unmarketable due to overripeness or fruit pressure. So I guess, Heather, that would be for you in terms of, so I'm hearing two things in that. One is quality, the unmarketable due to the overripeness, and part of that is based on the ability to actually harvest it due to the ability to actually harvest due to the storm situations. Heather, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I will take the one part first because I think it's a little bit easier. If it's overripened, if it changes, I guess the question is going to be, is there another use for that crop? Is there some sort of processed option? Is there something else that crop can be used for? And if so, that will be taken into consideration by the loss adjuster. As far as not being able to actually get out to harvest the crop because of unsafe conditions, that is not direct damage to the crop, but it is certainly a consideration. We have not heard that specifically from insurance companies, but to the extent that we need to be able to take that into consideration, we'd be happy to do that. Typically, those type of labor type issues would not be covered, but we understand the extreme nature of this type of situation and the uniqueness of it, and are willing to have those conversations if we get more questions on them. I can certainly follow up with the insurance companies to hear what they're seeing and to see if we can offer any additional flexibility.
Scott, if I could just add from the NAP perspective, we may be able to accommodate those types of losses, both as a quality loss and as an unharvested production loss. For quality loss coverage, it might be applicable, but it would also qualify as a production loss subject to an unharvested payment factor, just for awareness. And we can put that in the chat as well.
So thank you very much, John. And this the next question that we've got is kind of a two-parter. And I'm going to go first to NRCS, and then John, I think this also has implications for ECP, EFRP. But the question was about more information about the waiver of prior authorization and the inspection for NRCS clearing and rehabilitation practices. You know, if the person has an application in hand, but the application has not been acted on, and the producer needs to start clearing land, you know, under those practices, what determines whether the producer can get that waiver or not? So let's go back to NRCS.
Okay. And John, forgive me if I start stepping in the area of ECP as well. But for NRCS, having that application in hand, we've instructed states to move forward with the early start waiver. So there's, as far as the guarantee of the waiver, it comes with the ability of moving forward with that particular conservation practice. And let's just say it's obstruction removal. We have your application, issue the early start waiver, so that you can begin work. There is the only challenge that we see, and we really need to make sure our states are communicating this, is that with the early start waiver, it does not guarantee you a contract, because with our programs and under our authority within RCS, the applicant must meet eligibility. That's kind of on both sides. That's producer eligibility as well as land eligibility. I'm not so much concerned with the land eligibility, but producer eligibility may be the area that may disqualify you. And I say may. Some of you are producers, you work with FSA already of numerous years, may not be an issue there at all. It's just the basic requirements of our program. So the only thing there is that by receiving an early start waiver does not guarantee you would get a contract. As long as those other criteria are met, then a contract should be forthcoming. Now, we do need to be clear from FSA and you know what, let me stop. I'll let John address ECP. We've been working so closely together with sharing this information. It kind of comes out simultaneously when we're talking with our producers and our staff. But John, I'll stop there. So you can share the ECP side and the waiver requirements there.
Well, again, Jerry, thank you for that. Again, as we stated in the slide here, and as we stated on the call here, the waiver of prior authorization encompasses surface debris removal, fence repair, and removal of hazard trees up to 100 acres in aggregate. And that is generally applicable to all participants for the waiver of prior authorization. So anything that is not below the plow line, anything that does not require engineering plans, you are able to proceed. And I'll put that in the chat as well, Scott, just for people's reference.
Thank you, John. And I'm going to actually, Jerry and John, I'm going to come right back to you. One of the questions that we have is, can we talk more about the question of rehabbing riparian areas running through farms? That is, you know, places that you know, there might be log jams, tree loss, things like that for the riparian areas, and what programs that would fall under. Let me start with Jerry, and then we'll come to John, if that's okay.
So removing those tree hazards from streams and things that are running through farms, that is still under EQIP. It would be one of the two practice standards that I mentioned this morning. And so just you being able to have the ability to, whatever stretch of that stream's on your particular property running through your farm, removing that obstruction. But we also realize how much damage has been done to the farmland. Streams have widened, channels have changed. How much rehab would be allowed would be an engineering call. So that, again, looking at some of our engineering practices, stream restoration, there may be, and I know how involved that can be. But again, we have a practice standard for stream restoration as well. So it's going to be very important to, I know you may need to remove that debris in order to get things functioning. But as soon as we can get boots on the ground to really jump in and start looking at these sites, possibly looking at design work, I know we would love to be able to just jump right in and get these things corrected. And some of that may be on both sides. It may be equip, it may be ECP. And that's a determination made at the local, I'd say at the local service center between NRCS and FSA, as well as the producer, which is going to be a best fit, which is going to be more timely as far as the particular program and particular practices. But along those lines, some things are still going to be the same between the programs, depending on how much work you're having to do along the stream. If you're looking at removing roots, and then just the location, would it need to be or have a cultural resource review at that time? So those are just going to be things that it may delay what you want to do, but it's going to be a step in the right direction, and it's a protection for the producer as well as NRCS and FSA. I hope I've answered the question there. So, and I'm looking at it, the note put here encompasses surface debris removal, French repair, all of those things that John mentioned earlier are practices that can be moved on quickly. But as you start to get into areas of tree removal, if you're looking at removing stumps, I would definitely say reach out to the local service center and get them involved.
Yeah, Jerry, I think that's exactly right. And I just to emphasize, sounding a lot like NRCS here, the circumstance with waterways gets a little bit trickier. We do need to have an on-site assessment of the waterway. We are limited in what we can do with sediment removal and that sort of thing. So I think what Jerry said is absolutely accurate. We need to get folks out there and have a look.
All right, thank you both. Thank you all. Checking again, if there are any additional questions, please put them in the chat. I also wanted to really highlight that farmers.gov/hurricane, the communications team has been hard at work putting together some really good publications there that have been added to that website over the last couple of weeks. So really want to encourage folks to go there. If you are someone who's attending this, if you're attending this and you're someone who works with other producers, and you're able to disseminate information, there are a couple of really good overview documents there that are really up to date and new. So we really encourage you to access those documents through farmers.gov/hurricane. These meetings are intended to be a conversation. Are meant to be a conversation. We really want to continue to have opportunities for folks to get their questions answered and to get to have as much up-to-date information as possible for how to get their best assistance. So as we're finished up, but Heather, you wanted to drop something in. I wanted to check back with our panelists and make sure that wasn't anything that folks wanted to cover. Heather, I think you had something to update.
Yes, I just wanted to circle back on the question about if producer can't get physically can't get out to harvest the crop. It's very fact specific, and so the loss adjusters are really key in that piece. But if the producer truly can't get out to harvest the crop, then that should be considered an insurable cause of loss, as long as it was due to the hurricane, doing some damage to infrastructure or to the farm that prohibited the producer from being able to harvest, especially if it's like machine or mechanically harvesting. But in general, the rules would apply that, you know, if the hurricane did damage that prevented the policyholder from getting out and harvesting the crop, then that should be covered under crop insurance. But more details would really have to come into play with the loss adjuster.
Thank you very much, Heather. That's really helpful. I hope that folks who are attending have gotten some good information. We want to thank everyone for joining us this morning. And if you have additional questions, once again, this presentation, along with all the presentations that we've done, will be up on farmers.gov in the next few days. We are considering the need for future presentations like this. We really look to those of you who are here to let us know what you need and what would be helpful. Please, if you have further questions or you have other issues that you'd like for us to deal with, you can respond to the email that sent you the invite to this meeting, or respond to any of us who are here on the, on this webinar. I'm going to check one more time to see if there are any other questions from folks who are attending, or if there are any other comments by our panelists. Thank you all. Heather, John, Jerry, thank you very much for being here. Those of you on, who are here in the background providing information, thanks to you as well. If there are no other questions, we will stop there. Thank you all very much. This concludes our briefing, and I hope you have a great day. Thank you all very much.